how to sew a... So we're really right. Okay, things you need. Just for the purpose of demonstration, I'm going to use a piece of cloth here. And obviously we want some buttons to do this exercise. And some threads. I'm just gonna use a red one so it's a little bit more visible for you guys to see. I've got a sewing needle here, so I'll need to rethread this. Just a sewing needle, and that's pretty much it. Now this is not essential, but if you have a wax, this can come really handy. So once you thread through the needle, you can go over the wax like this a few times, and then you put it through the iron to heat set it, and what it does is it just stiffens the threads, and it's really handy because then it helps from not getting tangled. And this is a wax that I bought from the haberdashery store a long time ago, and it's nothing special, it's just wax. So back in my clothing alteration days, like, we used to even use candles, and I personally haven't used it myself, but maybe beeswax, anything wax I think would work. So just something to consider for your next crafty project. So first things first, I'm going to pull out some threads, and oh yeah, and forgot to mention, you want snippets as well. Let's just pull out some thread, not super long. And for this one, I'm going to double the thread here, like so. And I'm just gonna go over to the other end, and I'm going to thread this through the needle. We're essentially stitching 4 threads in a go. I'm gonna use this needle and put it through the loop, and I'm just going to tighten it and pull it over, just so that it makes it easy for me to put it through the hole of the needle. And really, this is just the way I do it, so please take this as a grain of sand. There are many methods out there, but I find this the best way to sew the buttons. And if you want to do it properly, yeah, I feel like this is a good way to do it. So I have actually trialed a few methods out here, and essentially what you want to avoid when you're sewing the buttons, you don't want this to be right at the base of the fabric. That is because you will most probably be sewing on the garment, a shirt, a coat, jacket, pants, and you will have a level of thickness in the materials of the garments or the item that you want to sew the button on. So you want to have a bit of allowance between the fabric and the base of the button. So what I've trialed out here is just a couple of different methods, and I was just trying to figure out what would be the easiest for you guys to do it. And so, for example, if it's like a standard collared shirt, you want about 3 millimeters between the base of the button and the fabric. I hope you can see this properly, but yeah, you have a bit of height in between. It makes it a lot easier for you to button up as well, just because you have a little bit more room. And so if you want to sew a button, for example, for a big coat, I'm talking about felted wool or something with a very thick material, you want about 8 millimeters in between the fabric and the button. The thicker the material, the more allowance you want. And if you want to be super accurate, it's probably good to just test it out and check the height before you start sewing on the actual garment. So let's get started. Now I have the thread through the needle. I'm just gonna take my wax here and go over a few times. one more time. Right, so now we're gonna put the thread through the iron to heat set the wax. Cool, nice and easy. So now we have the thread here, it's nice and stiff, and that will help it from getting tangled and messy. Let's say you want to sew the button here, and just for demonstration, I'm gonna just put a mark here, a little dot, so you can make a mark with your tailored chalk. And we want this to be the center of the button. From the right side of the fabric, I'm going to stitch into the dot from the other side. So that's a needle there. From the other side of the fabric, and without making any knots at the end, I'm just gonna leave a little bit here. And what I'm going to do is make a tiny stitch and then bring my needle to the same spot from the other side again. So now you'll start seeing like a little stitch, tiny stitch on the other side, and basically what you want to do is keep on stitching in the same spot. So then at the end, when you finish sewing the buttons, like it's not gonna be like messy like this. We don't want that. So that's what we're aiming for. So I'm gonna do a little stitch here, and then you're gonna go over again. So you're gonna go over twice and create this tiny stitch. And now that's very secure, and you can trim this thread off. So trim that off. And now we're ready to sew the button. For something like this is a 4-hole, and it really doesn't matter. You can go crisscross or parallel or vertical and create like this 11. I tend to do crisscross, so that's what I'm gonna do for this video. So it really doesn't matter which hole you start from. And let's say for a standard collared shirt, first I'm gonna create the first stitch. So I'm going diagonal. I've started from the top left hole here. I'm gonna go at the bottom, and I'm gonna put the needle through, and basically what I'm doing is just stitching at the same spot, or as close as you can. And before you pull it all the way through, so we want 3 millimeters as an allowance. And I'm gonna show you later, but at the end, once you finish stitching, you're gonna go over with the thread around the button a few times, and that helps bring all the threads together and secure it. By the time you do that, you're gonna lose about a couple of mil. We're gonna aim for 5 millimeters as an allowance between the fabric and the base of the button. And by the time we bring the threads around the bottom a few times, it's going to shrink in height a little bit. We should have roughly 3 millimeters as the true allowance. So I've seen people use like pins like this and have it sitting across the button and to help it give the allowance or whatnot. As a fashion student back in the day, I've been taught to use a matchstick, and we've been taught to put it through the bottom of the button, and then you stitch over it, and once you finish you can pull it out, and then you have a consistent height for each stitches that you make. But I personally found it very fiddly because you're handling the fabric and the button and this thing moving around while you're trying to stitch into the buttons. I just found it a bit fiddly. I personally found the easiest way is just to go over with your eye, or if you want to be super accurate, grab like a ruler where you can at least roughly measure like, okay, that's 5 mil. And then once you're happy with the height, then I'm just gonna continue going over. Now I've finished the stitch on the bottom. I'm gonna start from the top right without pulling the thread too hard. You don't want to pull the previous stitch. I'm gonna go over to the bottom left this time, and it's the same process. I'm just gonna go over on the exact same spot that we started and create my second stitch. So before I pull the second stitch in to secure, because I'm happy with the height we've got between the fabric and the button here, it's roughly 5 millimeters. So I find just holding on to the fabric and having your fingertips at the base of the button just to help hold and secure, I think this is the easiest way. And then I'm just pulling the thread to secure, so we know that it's also stitched at exact same height, if that makes sense. I'm gonna go over again, so we're repeating the process. So I'm gonna start again with top left and going over diagonally to the bottom right, and then go over the create a stitch through the fabric at the same spot, and stitch that through. And before we pull in this thread through, I'm just gonna hold it on with my fingertips again, holding onto the fabric and supporting the base of the button, and then I'm going to pull it in. Yep. So then all the threads are sitting nice and even. So now we've done diagonal here. I'm just gonna go from the top right down to the bottom left, and then create a stitch at the base over on top of each other. And once I'm ready to pull through the thread, I'm just gonna pinch this with my fingertips, support the button, and pull that in. Cool. So now we've gone over twice, and that should be secure enough. So now we're ready to bring this thread and rotate it around the button to secure and finish. We're starting right at the base of the button, around with the thread, starting from the top to the bottom. And then we're gonna make a stitch at the bottom, go over onto the other side and finish that off. I'm just using a little bit of force here to make sure the thread is going around nice and firm. Every 3-4 rounds you want to hold onto the button in position and just pull this thread in a little bit, and that'll help it secure the position, and also you won't get like tangly bits happening at the bottom. And I just feel like I need a few more rounds, so I'm just gonna try and work all the way right to the base of the fabric and pull that in. And then once you're done, I'm just gonna go over around like this, and I'm going to bring my needle through. So we're really making a knot here right at the base, and bring that in. So you create a little knot at the base here, and then you want to stitch through the fabric, go over on the other side to the exact same spot from where we started. And yep, that's gone in nicely. And then basically what you want to do here is go over with 2 tiny stitches again, just like how we started. So I'm gonna create a little stitch here. And go over one more time. And that's it. Doing it this way, you've got a nice secure button, all reinforced at the base. Now we have an allowance between the fabric and the base of the button, which is going to make it a lot easier for you to button up on a shirt or coat, jacket, pants, whatever it might be, catering for the thickness of the material that it's used. Depending on what type of item you're sewing the button, you basically want to work out, okay, how much allowance do I need, because this is where the placket or collar or whatever that is going to sit underneath the button, so you want the allowance for that. I personally find this is probably the best way to sew a button, and if you want to be more precise, I would test it out on a scrap fabric first and make sure that it buttons up nicely to the actual garment, and then I'll start sewing on the actual garment or the item. Not only this is now very secure, and we've got a beautiful allowance in between, because we stitched over on the same spot where we initially marked on the fabric as the center of the button. It just looks beautiful on the other side as well. It's just like a little tiny dot, and I really like it. Not like this messy business going on. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you found it useful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel if you want to see more contents like this. If you have any questions or anything else that you want to see from this channel, please let me know in the comment section below.